Banks are the biggest legal scam in the world, but nobody questions it. So, what if I told you that for the last 100 years, economists couldn't even agree on how banks work? They had 3 completely different theories. 3 contradictory theories. And here's the kicker. Nobody bothered to test which one was correct until 2014. That's right. In the entire 5,000-year history of banking, the first actual scientific test happened less than 10 years ago. Sounds crazy, right? Today we're exposing the biggest secret in economics, one that changes everything you thought you knew about money, inflation, unemployment, and why some countries thrive while others struggle. Here's what's wild. Go outside right now and ask random people what's most important in the economy. They'll say money, banking, hard work. But ask an economist, they'll talk about literally anything except money and banks. Why? Because once you understand how banks really work, you realize most economic problems are completely artificial. They're accounting problems, not real problems. By the end of this video, you'll know how banks actually create money, why the 1970s inflation had nothing to do with oil, why today's inflation isn't about supply chains, and how this hidden system controls your entire financial future. Ready? Well, let's get started. So let me ask you, how do you think banks work? Most people say banks take deposits from savers, do some analysis, then lend that money to borrowers. Simple, right? That's theory number 1, financial intermediation. This is what they teach today. Banks are just middlemen, nothing special. According to this theory, banks are boring. Nothing to see here, folks. But there are 2 other theories that tell completely different stories. Theory number 2 is called the fractional reserve theory. It says that when banks all interact inside the same system, something interesting happens. Money seems to get created. This effect is called the money multiplier. Let's understand that with a simple example. Imagine Andrew deposits $100 into ABC Bank. The bank is required to keep $10 of that as reserves. That means the bank is allowed to lend out the remaining $90. So the bank lends $90 to Alice. Now here's where it feels strange. Alice now has $90 she can spend. Andrew still sees $100 in his account. So on paper, it looks like the system now has $190, even though only $100 was originally deposited. But nothing magical actually happened. Andrew's money is simply being reused. And this part is very important. The bank needed Andrew's deposit first before it could lend to Alice. No deposit, no loan. So under this theory, banks don't create money out of nothing. They multiply existing deposits by lending them again and again through the system. Theory number 3 is called the credit creation theory. It is the most radical one. This one says that banks don't need deposits first in order to lend. They actually create new money when they give out loans. Here's how it works. Alice walks into ABC Bank and asks for a $100 loan. The bank approves it. The bank then simply types plus 100 into Alice's account. That's it. Now look at the result. Alice now has $100 she can spend. Nobody deposited that $100. No one else's balance went down. The bank didn't move money from anywhere. It just created it. So under this theory, banks don't wait for money to exist before lending. They create new money by lending it into existence. So which theory is correct? Now here's where it gets sussy. For an entire century, these 3 contradictory theories existed, and nobody conducted a scientific test to figure out which was true. Think about that. Imagine doctors arguing for 100 years about whether the heart pumps blood or stores memories, and nobody ever checking. In 2014, a famous German researcher named Richard Werner finally said, "Enough. I'm taking out a real loan from a real bank and I'm watching exactly what happens inside their system." The 3 theories make specific predictions. Financial intermediation. Money comes from other people's deposits. Fractional reserve. Money comes from excess reserves at the central bank. Credit creation. Money comes from nowhere, just invented. The researcher takes out the loan and monitors the bank's internal accounting in real time. Deposits, untouched. Central bank reserves, untouched. The money was just created, out of nothing. Theory number 3 was correct. Banks really do create money from thin air. This paper became one of the most downloaded in all of Elsevier's scientific publications. Why? People couldn't believe it. The truth had been suppressed for a century. How it actually works. Okay, let me break this down in easiest way. So it's crystal clear. Think of a bank like a pizza shop, but instead of making pizzas, they make money. Except here's the wild part. They don't need any ingredients. Let me show you exactly what happens when a guy called Smith walks into a bank asking for a $300,000 mortgage. Step 1. Smith makes a promise. Smith signs a piece of paper that says, "I promise to pay back $300,000 plus interest over the next 30 years. This paper is called a mortgage agreement. It's basically an IOU. Step 2. The bank buys Smith's promise. The bank looks at this IOU and says, "Cool, we'll buy that promise from you." They take Smith's IOU and put it in their notebook under things we own. Why? Because Smith now owes them money, and that's valuable to the bank. It's like owning a promise of future payments. Step 3. Here's where the magic happens. Smith says, "Okay, great. Now where's my $300,000? And the bank doesn't go to a vault. They don't take money from others' savings accounts sitting in the back. They don't transfer anything from anywhere. They literally just open up their computer and type to Smith's account $300,000. That's it. They just typed it in. The money appears in Smith's account like magic, except it's not magic. It's just accounting. Imagine the bank has a giant notebook with 2 columns. Left side, things we own. Smith's promise to pay us $300,000 check. Right side, things we owe. We owe Smith $300,000 in his account check. Both sides go up by the same amount. The notebook stays balanced. But here's the key. That $300,000 didn't exist before. It wasn't moved from anywhere. The bank just wrote it into existence. When Smith goes to buy his house, he can spend that $300,000 because everyone accepts it as real money. And it is real money now. The bank created it by writing it down. It's like if you and your friend were playing a game and you could just write, "I have 100 points in a notebook," and suddenly you actually have 100 points in the game. Except this is real life, and that $300,000 is real money that can buy a real house. Where did the $300,000 come from? Nowhere. It was just created out of thin air by typing numbers into a computer. 5 minutes before Smith walked into that bank, that money didn't exist anywhere in the world. Now it does, and Smith can spend it on a house. And this is how 97% of all the money in the economy gets created. Not by governments printing cash, not by minting coins, but by banks typing numbers into accounts when people take out loans. Mind-blowing, right? So this deserves liking this video so that more people get to know what is going on. Why banks are powerful. Banks make 3 crucial decisions: who gets money, how much they get, what they can use it for. Every time a bank approves a loan, new money enters the economy. Every time they deny a loan, that money never gets created. These decisions shape our entire economy. What about central banks? Yes, central banks are powerful. They set rules that control what banks can do. But here's the key point. Central banks work by controlling how much money banks create through loans. The central bank doesn't create most money. Regular banks do when they lend. Why don't they talk about this? Because it leads to awkward questions. If banks can create money by making loans, why do we have unemployment? Why can't we fund roads and schools the same way we fund home loans? The uncomfortable truth. Many of our economic problems aren't because money is scarce. They're because of choices. Choices about who deserves loans, what's worth funding, and what risks we'll accept. These are decisions we make, not laws of nature. How credit creates bubbles and inflation. Not all bank credit creation is equal. Money flows 2 directions, and this determines whether we get prosperity or crisis. Path number 1. Productive credit. Banks create money for small business loans, new technologies, factory equipment, infrastructure projects. This creates new value, jobs, productivity. The money creates something that didn't exist before. There's never been a banking crisis from too much small business investment. Why? Productive investment creates real value and sustainable income. Path number 2. Unproductive credit. Banks create money for asset purchases, buying what already exists, real estate speculation, stock trading, mergers and acquisitions. Nothing new's created. You're just buying ownership of existing things. And here's where it gets dangerous. When banks pump massive amounts of newly created money into asset markets, you get asset price inflation. It's like printing money and pumping it into housing or stocks. Prices go up, not because assets got better, but because there's more money chasing them. This creates a Ponzi scheme. Banks create money for people to buy houses. Prices rise. More people see rising prices and want in. Banks create more money. Prices rise more. As long as banks keep creating credit for asset purchases, the party continues. But this only works while banks continue creating credit. Once they stop, it's musical chairs. The music ends. Not enough buyers. Prices stop rising, then fall. Banks only have about 10% equity. They're cushioned for bad loans. So if asset prices drop just 10%, you've busted the banking system. People can't repay because their asset is worth less than borrowed. Non-performing loans pile up. Banks panic and restrict lending. Asset prices collapse. Major banking crisis. Let me show you how crazy this gets. 1980s Japan. Banks started creating massive amounts of money for real estate loans. The bubble got so insane that by 1989, a tiny plot of land in Tokyo, just the area around the Imperial Palace, was worth as much as the entire state of California. Think about that. A small piece of Tokyo equals all of California. Every city, every farm, every piece of land in California. That's what happens when banks pump too much money into assets. But it doesn't stop there. Remember consumer credit? The other unproductive form we talked about earlier. Banks also create money for things like credit cards, car loans, and vacations. Here's why that's a problem. Warren takes out a $10,000 loan to buy a TV. The bank just created $10,000 of new money and gave it to Warren. But here's the catch. No new TV was made because of that loan. Warren is just buying a TV that already exists. So now you have $10,000 more dollars in the economy, but the same number of TVs. More money chasing the same stuff? That's inflation. Here's the big picture. Total credit equal to productive credit plus unproductive credit. In most countries, unproductive credit dominates. Way more money goes into buying than building, and that's the problem. Money gets created, prices explode, bubbles form, and eventually everything crashes. That's why we get bubbles, crashes, and inequality on repeat. The fake stories about inflation, 1970s versus today. They've been lying to you for decades. Let me show you the pattern. Pop quiz. What caused the massive 1970s inflation? Everyone says OPEC oil embargo, energy prices shot up, caused inflation. It's in every textbook. Everyone believes it. One problem. It's completely false. Here's the data. US bank credit was already growing 13.5% yearly by June 1971, peaked at 16.4% in March 1973. Massive money creation flooded the economy. When did the OPEC embargo happen? Autumn 1973. Inflation was already raging before the oil crisis. Oil didn't cause inflation. Banks creating too much credit did. Oil was just a convenient scapegoat. Germany? 14% credit expansion before the oil shock. Japan? 25.5% growth in December 1972, before the alleged cause. Now, let's look at today. Same playbook, different excuse. The official narrative keeps changing. Pandemic supply chains, Russia-Ukraine war, corporate greed. Here's what really happened. 2008. The Fed massively expanded. Everyone expected inflation. Didn't happen. Why? Because while the Fed expanded, banks contracted their lending. Total money supply actually went down. 2020. Totally different. The Fed injected money and banks went wild. One of the highest credit growth rates since the 1970s. Fed money plus bank money equal to massive money supply increase. What happens when you massively increase money supply? Inflation. Every single time. The Russia-Ukraine war started late February 2022, but inflation was already sky high throughout 2021. War didn't cause inflation. It just gave politicians and central bankers someone to blame. See the pattern? They always blame external shocks. Oil, war, supply chains. But the real cause is always the same. Banks creating too much credit too fast. Inflation is stealth taxation, an unnecessary restriction on prosperity we could have. The solution. So, what's the fix? When banks create credit for productive stuff, real businesses, new tech, things that boost productivity, you get actual growth and prosperity. Loans get repaid, no crash. Here's the crazy part. We can grow the economy even at full employment. The only real limit is human creativity, which is basically unlimited. We have the ideas and technology, they just need funding. The key? Thousands of small local community banks making decisions based on local knowledge. Credit flows to productive local businesses. Jobs stay local. Prosperity gets shared. The problem? A handful of megabanks making decisions from towers far away. Credit flows to speculation and financial games instead. Structure matters. We don't have to have unemployment, boom-bust cycles, banking crises, or poverty. Prosperity for everyone is totally possible, if we use bank credit creation the right way. These problems are just accounting tricks, easy to solve if the people in power actually wanted to solve them. Spoiler, they often don't. So what do you actually do with this info? First, understand. Debt is money. 97% of money in circulation was created as debt by banks. This changes everything. Number one, that we can't afford it. Lie. Your mortgage isn't taking money from someone else. It's created from nothing. When politicians say we can't afford it, they're lying. Banks create trillions for asset bubbles all the time. The money exists. It's just about who gets it. Number two, inflation is credit creation. Inflation isn't random. It's driven by how much credit banks create and where it flows. Real estate booms, stock bubbles, crypto pumps, that's credit creation, not supply and demand. Watch bank credit growth and you'll predict inflation better than any economist on TV. Number three, crises are policy choices. Banking. Crises happen when too much credit flows into assets instead of productive stuff. Recessions and unemployment? Not inevitable, natural disasters. They're the result of choices about where credit goes. Bottom line, the system isn't broken by accident. It works exactly as designed. Don't just watch. Act. Here's where most people fail. They learn all this and then do nothing. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. So what's your move? Share this. Most people have no idea how money actually works. The system stays rigged because people stay ignorant. Watch the data, track bank credit growth. It tells you when bubbles are forming and crashes are coming before they happen. Demand change. Support local community banks. Push for policies that serve people, not just the wealthy. The only question is, who controls the power to create money and what do they use it for? Now you know the answer. What are you going to do about it? Remember this. Wealth and power aren't about how much you earn. They're about understanding how the system works and positioning yourself in the flow of money creation. They want you believing in scarcity, accepting unemployment and inequality as natural. But now you know better. When someone tells you we can't afford it, they're showing their limits, not realities. Click on the I button now for the full explanation of how money actually operates. If your view of banking just got flipped upside down, slam that like and subscribe, because I'm tearing apart more systems they keep hidden. Let me know in the comments if you're enlightened or red-pilled. Honestly, reaching just 20 aware people matters more than chasing algorithms. Truth is the mission. Next video drops soon. If I don't get silenced, stay vigilant.